Amazing moment revealed. Cowboy's surprising response to Apache mother and son's cry for help. Jake's mornings began before dawn, the distant mountains silhouetted against the fading stars. As he sifted through the dust and debris left by both nature and the burdens of his father's passing, the ranch felt more fragile than ever. The heavy air clung to him like an old guilt, a reminder that he was now the steward of this land, tasked with preserving a legacy that seemed to wither under the scorching sun and unyielding economic realities. While neighboring ranchers thrived, their sprawling properties glistening with prosperity, Jake felt like a leaf helplessly caught in an unforgiving wind, struggling to remain grounded. On this evening, the sun hung low, staining the horizon a rich orange. Dust swirled around him like ghosts from the past, and that's when he heard it, a desperate cry that cut through the fading light, resonating deep within his chest. A pit opened in his stomach as he instinctively spurred his horse onward. What if it was too late? The thought chilled him, a gnawing worry. He had always been one to stand firm, a proud cowboy, yet now fear gripped him with its icy fingers. In moments, he found her, a woman, Maria, clinging to her sick young son amidst the wreckage of her broken-down truck. The strains of her voice echoed the desperation in her eyes as she recounted her plight, detailing not only the immediate struggle of a mechanical breakdown, but the greater burdens of discrimination they faced. Each word she spoke cut deeper into Jake, exposing the dichotomy of his privileged life alongside hers, filled with pain and resilience. How could he, a man tied to the land in the past, bear witness to her suffering? This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about understanding the struggles of a community often overlooked. A moral dilemma suddenly thrust upon him. Chemo's sudden shivering sent a jolt through Jake, reality striking like a whip. Panic flickered within him. He had lost no one to the harshness of the world, yet now he was tethered to her fear. The pressure mounted. Maria's steadfast resolve contrasted sharply against Jake's wavering heart. Should he draw the line between his cowboy duties and his newfound empathy? Why was he, a rugged figure of the dirt and grit, feeling his heart tugged in a direction he had never considered before? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Jake was confronted with the truth. Helping Maria and Chemo could come at a steep price. The whispers in town were not just breezes but raging winds that could uproot his reputation. Friends had already begun to look at him askance, their unsettling glares evidencing their disapproval. Each moment spent with Maria felt like a weight added to his shoulders, a burden he wasn't sure he was prepared to carry. Yet her resilience, the way she clung to hope for her son, flipped a switch in his mind. Was he willing to gamble everything for a family he had just met, in a world where kindness was often misconstrued as folly? Then he received the note, a chilling warning that dripped with veiled threats. The ink felt like a noose around his neck, choking the bravery he had summoned. In the stillness of his room that night, the urgency of Chemo's cries echoed relentlessly in his mind. Would he step beyond the limits of his world? Could he risk it all for the fight against what he now recognized as something greater? Jake found himself standing at the precipice of change, the tension mounting, each beat of his heart a reminder that the path ahead was laden with upheaval. Choices waited, heavy as the night itself, framing the future of not just a ranch, but of a man torn between duty and humanity. As the night deepened, Jake paced the wooden floor of his room, the shadows dancing across the walls like threatening specters. The note lingered in his mind like a phantom. Each time he replayed the chilling words in his head, he felt his resolve eroding. Yet with every thought of Chemo's desperate condition, a fierce determination began to take root in his chest. Maybe this was a moment of transformation, a turning point that could redefine him not just as a cowboy, but as a man unafraid to confront his conscience. He stepped outside, finding the starlit sky suffocating and beautiful in its vastness. The land, familiar and fierce, seemed to beckon him forward. a stark contrast to the oppressive urges to retreat cloaked in comfort and self-interest. Maria hadn't just asked for help. She'd opened the door to a reality he had long ignored, one filled with challenges far greater than the ranching life he'd navigated with ease. What if he could be more than he had ever imagined? The thought surged through him, igniting a flash of insight. While the ranch had always been written in the unyielding lines of duty and obligation, there lay another path, one that could carve a new legacy, not born from the sweat of a lineage, but forged from the empathy he felt pulse like fire in his veins. The next morning, he kicked off his boots with newfound resolve and set out to build a plan. He could start small, maybe purchase supplies for chemo and sit with Maria, really listen to her story. This wasn't about charity. It was about understanding. It was about confronting his own privilege and the limits of his own world while connecting with the human experience that transcended boundaries. Yet as he returned to town, the atmosphere felt charged, a cacophony of whispers swirling dangerously close. His friends, once vocal in their companionship, shifted their gaze as if he carried the stench of defeat just by acknowledging Maria and Chemo's struggles. Each disapproving stare felt like lead weights tethering him down. Did he even know how to confront them? How to align his values with actions without losing himself? At the hardware store, a familiar figure blocked Jake's path. Bud, a longtime friend and rancher, filled the doorway, his arms crossed defensively. The tension was palpable, air thick with unsaid words. Bud's eyes burned with questions, the thick silence fraught with challenge. "What's gotten into you, Jake? You've been seen with that Apache woman." Bud spat, a trace of accusation hidden in concern. "You're one of us. What are you doing?" Jake felt heat rush to his face. His heart pounded in rebellion against the hollowness of their unspoken code. "What I'm doing is trying to help a kid who doesn't have anyone else," he shot back, the fervor in his voice surprising even himself. "What's wrong with seeing someone as a human being?" The moment hung in the air, fraught with the potential for judgment or camaraderie. Jake braced himself, aware that this was a defining moment. He'd ignited a spark between them, one that could lead to isolation or an uncomfortable confrontation with solidarity. What if standing for Maria meant standing against everything he had ever known? As Bud opened his mouth, preparing to respond, Jake realized the conversation could just as easily veer towards conflict as it could create understanding. He took a breath, poised to navigate a path he'd never traveled before, uncertain of the outcomes yet compelled by the urgency of truth. Either way, he felt the wheels of change turning faster than he had ever anticipated, and as the crossroads approached, full of untold consequences, Jake knew one thing. The challenges ahead would not just be external, his greatest battle lay within. What would it cost to break through the barriers separating their lives? Would he emerge transformed? Amidst the growing tension, Jake glimpsed 3 shadowy figures approaching. The unmistakable glint in their eyes carried a threat that sent a jolt through him. Decisions woven tightly into the fabric of his future were about to be tested in ways he never expected. The time had come to face the consequences of his choices. Jake felt an unsettling chill creep down his spine as the figures drew nearer. Tension hung in the air, crackling like a dry summer storm. He had never wanted to be the center of attention, yet here he stood, the potential catalyst for something much larger than himself. The decision before him loomed like a mountain peak shrouded in fog. It was daunting, but he could no longer squint through the haze of avoidance. As the trio stepped into the light, their expressions were marred with contempt. He recognized 2 of them well, Charlie and Denny, fellow ranchers who had never shied away from vocalizing their opinions, particularly when they felt a member of their circle threatened the community's unity. The third man was unfamiliar, his broad shoulders and intimidating posture suggesting he was either ready for a fight or a confrontation. "Hey, Jake," Charlie called out, his tone dripping with condescension. "Are you really going to stand with them? What are you thinking?" Laughter punctuated his words, thin and sharp. Each laugh was like a blade. They weren't just mocking him, they were deconstructing the very essence of his rebellion. Jake held his ground, his heart pounding a martial rhythm in his chest. There was no way he could take a step back now, not when the stakes had been raised higher than he had anticipated. "Standing with them?" Jake echoed, the warmth of indignation spreading through him. "I'm standing for what's right. You two might see a woman and her son as problems to ignore, but I see people. What kind of men are you if you can't even recognize their humanity? A brief silence pushed through the air, giving way to shock and awe at Jake's unexpected fervor. But Charlie quickly shook off his astonishment, thrusting his chest out defiantly. Oh, is that what you're calling it now? Helping them? Don't make me laugh. You're just playing the white knight, thinking you can save the world one Apache woman at a time. Newsflash, Jake, you don't belong there, and neither do they. The weight of his words hung heavily with implications of failure. Certainly, Jake's insecurities danced in the margins. Not belonging was a specter that had lingered in his mind since childhood. It was easy to feel like an outsider. Everyone felt that way at some point. Now, though, would he let it haunt him? Jake clenched his fists, conscious that he needed to respond with conviction. He took a step closer, allowing the gravity of his belief to wash over them. I don't need a cape or a title to do what's right. If anything, I see now that it's more about understanding, more about building connections rather than dividing ourselves further. The unfamiliar man stepped forward, eyebrows raised in mild astonishment at Jake's defiant words. But behind his eyes, a flicker of appreciation glinted, only for it to be overwhelmed by the rousing dynamic of his companions. Let me tell you something, Denny chimed in, attempting to reclaim the narrative. You think this ends well? You'll only lose face for sticking your neck out for people who don't care about you. Seeing the boys united against him set his heart racing, yet Jake's determination blossomed anew. Each word he spoke seemed to hammer against the beat of his resolve. Maybe you're right that I might lose something, but what I've already lost is far greater than pride or reputation. I've lost sight of what it means to be human when we turn our backs on those who need help. The tension in the air thickened, a standoff brewing between Jake's emerging self and the tightly entrenched views of his friends. He understood now that this confrontation was only a reflection, not just of their views, but of his own willingness to fight against everything he had been taught about loyalty and family ties. The atmosphere crackled as that third man's eyes narrowed, clearly looking for a spark. Something was simmering beneath the surface, and it wouldn't be long before all hell broke loose. His mind flickered to chemo. The risks he might take were worth far more than what he would lose. Yet under this looming confrontation, Jake knew a choice awaited him. Would he stand firm against an avalanche of hostility, or would he buckle under the weight of peer expectations? As the air settled, heavy with anticipation, he felt it. The moment of truth loomed around him, teasing a revelation that was yet to unfold. Perhaps this altercation was about more than just defense of others. It was about claiming his own space in a world that felt foreign. And just as he thought he had a grip on his imminent decision, an unexpected voice called out from behind. A voice that threatened to change everything he believed he understood. Jake turned, sensing the weight of expectancy in the air. His heart raced as he faced the newcomer, anticipation and dread entwined. Just who was this person intruding on the standoff? The familiar faces of Charlie and Denny twisted into scorn, revealing their less than friendly reception toward anyone who dared to challenge the prevailing narrative. Clear out, Danny, Charlie gestured dismissively, irritation vibrating through his frame. This doesn't concern you. The man, a tall figure with a rugged demeanor, stepped forward, unbothered by Charlie's aggression. Actually, it does, he replied, casting Jake a knowing glance. It concerns anyone with a sense of decency. In that moment, Jake sensed a shift. An unfamiliar, comforting presence intermingled with the hostility he faced. Who was this man? Did he hold the answers Jake had sought within himself? Look, I don't want any trouble, Jake muttered, but his voice wavered despite his resolve. He struggled between self-preservation and the potent urge to align himself with those in need, echoed hauntingly by his own fear of standing alone. Denny squared his shoulders, inching threateningly toward Danny. You don't understand how things work around here. You might think you're helping, but it's a fast ticket to losing everything. Lose what? A reputation built on fear? Danny shot back, his voice steady. Tell me, what kind of community do you think you're defending when it thrives on silence and ignorance? Jake held his breath, trying to decipher the complex emotions swirling within him. Did he envy Danny's ability to articulate his thoughts clearly? Jake had spent years avoiding confrontation, recalibrating his reality to accommodate others' expectations. Yet, here in this charged moment, he felt a flicker of hope igniting the center of his uncertainty. Charlie erupted with anger, his voice grating. "You think a few well-chosen words will change the world? You're just as naive as he is." That comment ignited an insistent urge within Jake. The intimacy of the internal argument resurfaced. Was he simply an idealist, or could he be the catalyst for change? Each taunt and provocation deepened his conviction, underlining all he had come to learn about the fragility of human relationships. "I want to stand for something real, something that matters," Jake finally declared. "If that comes with facing ridicule and losing your acceptance, then so be it. I will not abandon those who need help." A moment of charged silence enveloped them, a palpable shift where tension hung like a coiled spring on the precipice of release. A flicker of respect glinted in Danny's eyes as Jake spoke, but was it enough to fortify his resolve? "Jake, think this through," Danny pressed, his tone softer, almost pleading. "You don't want to ruin your life over this. The stakes are higher than you realize." His own past echoed back. Whispers of insecurity and longing to fit in had often silenced his true voice. How many more moments would he allow to slip by, shackling himself to resentment and regret? "Maybe it's my life to ruin," Jake shot back defiantly, the challenge igniting a fire within him. "I'm tired of being someone I'm not, just to fit into your version of what's right. This may lead to loss, but it'll also lead to growth." The words hung in the air like a promise, issuing a challenge to the very foundation of his understanding of belonging. He felt the beginnings of a cathartic belief taking form, one that cut through the bitterness and discontent he had lived with for too long. Suddenly the atmosphere buzzed with electric uncertainty. He stood at the precipice of transformation, but the voice resonated within him. What did this confrontation truly mean for his future? And if he was resolved to change, what required sacrifice in his unwavering commitment to do the right thing? With his heart drumming wildly, he turned back to the ranchers, desperate to claim his truth. Yet, his internal battle was only beginning. The consequences of this confrontation loomed ahead, whispering hauntingly of the struggle for authenticity and courage as well. Through the burgeoning storm of emotions, Jake sensed something was shifting. What lay ahead threatened to unravel everything he had clung to. As the air thickened with discord and possibility, the next chapter in his life loomed, and he realized, now more than ever, he needed to confront the ramifications of stepping into the unknown. Jake stood, his heart pounding in the encroaching silence, reacquainting himself with the fledgling confidence that surged through his veins. The flames of confrontation ignited a fervor within him, illuminating the shadows of doubt that had lingered too long. He had declared his truth, yet the reality of that choice began to stretch before him like a vast uncharted landscape, one fraught with treachery and hardship. The charged atmosphere crackled around him. Each pair of eyes laden with expectation felt like strands of a web drawing tighter. Denny remained on edge, the uncertainty of Jake's decision evident in his clenched fists. Charlie's scorn morphed into something eerily still, as if he momentarily weighed the ramifications of Jake's newfound boldness, poised between anger and apprehension. Unflinching, Jake sought the composure that had fled moments earlier. He met Danny's gaze, grateful for the man's support, yet overwhelmed by an acute awareness of the implications that came with this newfound resolve. He thought about those he sought to advocate for, the countless stories of struggling families, forgotten voices waiting to break free. It propelled him forward, a stark contrast to the fears threatening to entangle him again. "Why do you care so much, Danny?" Jake asked, breaking the suffocating stillness. "Because someone has to," Danny answered, the fire in his eyes burning hot but unwavering. "You see it, don't you? The injustice festering in silence? You have a choice now. Support it or rise against it." The words struck a chord, and suddenly Jake felt a surge of awareness. This wasn't just about him anymore. This was about something bigger. Could he really be a catalyst for change in a place that seemed rotted from the inside out? Perhaps there were parts of himself he had yet to discover, parts entangled in moments like this, yet to burst forth and defy what he had been conditioned to believe. "But what can I do?" Jake retorted, frustration bubbling beneath his bravado. "I'm just one person. Change begins with one voice, Danny replied, maintaining his steady demeanor. But that voice needs to be backed by actions that are just as resolute. Jake clenched his fists, contemplating the steep path that lay before him. He had grown so accustomed to merging into the background that even the thought of stepping into the limelight made him recoil. Yet the more he thought of others who bore the burden of suffering in silence, the more enthralling the possibility became. What if I fail? What if I lose everything? The old fears crept back, weaving familiar strings of self-doubt deep in his chest. In trying, you'll discover what you're truly capable of, Danny countered, stepping closer, his voice a hushed reassurance buoyed by confidence. Fear can be a good teacher, but only if you let it. Let it forge you into the person you were meant to be. As he absorbed the weight of Danny's words, realization hit him. Perhaps failure was a part of this journey, a necessary sacrifice for the sake of authenticity. It was a premature resolution, carved from the fires of conflict and trial, destined to test his resolve. Jake's resolve veered towards conviction, fueled by the specter of becoming not just a participant of his life, but its active architect. He began to forge a plan, each strand of his resolve weaving together a tapestry of hopes, strength, and perhaps even redemption. However, the unyielding shadows of doubt still loomed, whispering against the courage he was inching towards. What's next? He wondered silently. How do I even begin? Just then, the air shifted yet again as a lone figure emerged from the fringes of the gathering. A woman, cloaked in stoicism, her expression unreadable yet potent, strode forward with purpose. She was neither friend nor foe, but her presence hinted at complications that could either bolster or bury Jake's aspirations. Let's see where this path leads, Jake breathed to himself, the sinews of determination tightening around him. But as the woman approached, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to be thrust into an even deeper struggle, one that would require every ounce of the courage he was still trying to harness. Would he stutter once confronted with the raw reality, or rise as he'd hoped? The next moment dawned ominously, challenging him to face what was rapidly becoming an arduous odyssey of self-discovery. The woman approached, her presence undeniable, the tension in the air thickening as if the world now hung on her every step. Jake breathed in sharply, a battle raging inside him. The desire to rise was countered by the trepidation that came with uncertainty. He could see the world he thought he knew begin to shift again, pushing him towards some undefined reckoning. Jake, she said, her voice steady and piercing, I've heard about you. You spoke out, didn't you? Her gaze was sharp yet contemplative, searching his countenance for answers. She was keenly aware of Jake's fears, some semblance of understanding flickering behind her steely demeanor. I did, Jake managed, his heart thumping in his chest. But No, don't diminish what you did, she interrupted, her tone shifting to a firmer cadence. You made a choice this evening. That's the first step. He nodded, feeling a combination of validation and unfamiliarity. It sounded simple when she articulated it, but the implications weighed heavier than an anchor. I just don't know what to do next, he admitted, unable to mask the tremor in his voice as he grappled with the unknown. Her expression softened slightly, revealing the lines of experience etched across her face. The next step isn't always clear. It's about understanding the ground beneath your feet and learning to navigate it. You think you're just one person, but one single voice can resonate louder than an entire crowd if it's anchored in truth. Embrace that. Jake contemplated her words, burrowing deeper into their meaning. He envisioned the families he wanted to help, the stories that remained untold. Could he really become their voice? Tackling those thoughts stirred a mixture of urgency and fear, but her presence provided an unexpected anchor amid the storm inside him. Then what do I do? He finally asked, the question hanging in the air laden with possibility. Start with something small, she encouraged, her eyes gleaming with conviction. Identify a specific issue, gather information, speak with those affected, immerse yourself in the truth of their lives. Build connections, community. This is where change is forged. Something clicked within him. The abstract thought of advocating for others morphed into tangible action. He could anchor himself in their stories, enrich his knowledge, and map out a path. As he mulled over the ideas, an ember of determination sparked into a more vivid flame. It was transformation on the horizon. "Thank you," he whispered, the gratitude swelling within him. The rush of adrenaline propelled him forward. Clarity pulsed through his veins as self-doubt eased away, replaced by action-orientated thought. But just as clarity brightened the stage, doubt snuck back in, casting a long shadow. "What if I mess it up?" Jake contemplated, staring into the depths of uncertainty. The past whispered cautions of missteps, failures, and rejection. "Connecting with people isn't about perfection," she replied, reading the turmoil behind his eyes. "It's about fostering growth, learning from missteps along the way. Fear acts as a fine tutor, if only you feed your courage." Her words reverberated as he grasped their significance. Movement required conviction, steps encased in both vulnerability and tenacity. Each interaction could nurture the growth he so desperately sought, not only for himself, but for those who remained in the shadows. With that, he straightened his back, embracing a resolve he had scarcely felt before. He began formulating a plan, a map layered with research, conversation, and community outreach. Each element became a stepping stone toward exploration, wherein fears transformed into platforms of determination. But just as Jake began envisioning the contours of this nascent journey, his thoughts became punctuated by a sudden chill that slithered down his spine. He caught sight of Charlie again, loitering at the edges of the group, his expression hardened anew. The once ambiguous threat now crystallized into something sharper, something that could converge upon Jake's newfound aspirations like an unwelcome storm. The weight of the situation anchored Jake's resolve, but so did the foreboding tension of confrontation that loomed on the horizon. Could he navigate this looming conflict without sacrificing the very ideals he sought to advocate? His mind raced with fresh urgency as he faced the realities of his choice. The stage was set, and the stakes unfurled into the unknown depths of his next venture. Would he grapple with both opportunity and opposition? The burning question lingered. Was Jake truly ready to fight not just for himself, but for the voices that deserved to be heard? Jake navigated the crowd, but his mind was spiraling with increasing velocity. Each heartbeat echoed doubt, clashing against the resolve that had lit within him only moments prior. The woman's words nudged him toward potential, but Charlie loomed in the shadows like a specter of his past, a reminder of every failure, every ridicule he had endured. As he glanced back at Charlie, the pit of his stomach twisted. Jake had felt the weight of fear many times before, but this situation felt different. Every confrontation had left its mark, scar tissue forming where hope should thrive. Yet now, emboldened, he had to ask himself whether fear would be his guide or his chains. He caught the remnants of the conversation around him, the hopes and struggles of those who shared their stories, their battles woven into the fabric of his surroundings. These weren't just voices, they were lives, and he needed to become their advocate. He had to rise above the noise of self-doubt, pushing past Charlie's impending confrontation to reclaim his narrative. The plan solidified further in his mind. He needed to meet people where they were. He thought of the coffee shop down the street, a favorite haunt where people gathered and shared their aspirations, frustrations, and fears amid cups of steaming lattes. It was the perfect place to begin weaving the threads of connection. Could he truly find stories to represent? In a moment of spontaneity, he decided to approach the barista, a woman he knew only in passing. Her name was Mia, and he recognized an unpolished sincerity in her demeanor that encouraged openness. Taking a deep breath, Jake approached. "Hey Mia, do you have a moment?" The words were more confident than he felt. "Sure, Jake. Everything all right?" Her eyes shimmered with genuine curiosity. "I want to make a difference," he began, aware of how vulnerable he sounded. "I know people around here struggle, and I want to connect with their stories. Would you be willing to help?" Mia's brow furrowed slightly, then a smile crept across her face. "Absolutely. We have regulars who have fascinating backgrounds. If you want, we can schedule some time to sit with them and learn." Jake's heart raced with gratitude. "Really? I appreciate it. I just want to provide a voice for those who can't speak up." In that moment, he felt the first flicker of momentum course through him. As he and Mia exchanged ideas, a lightness replaced the knot of anxiety in his gut. Eyes shining with enthusiasm, she detailed the lives of their patrons, the struggles of parents trying to make ends meet, the hopes of students navigating a complex world. They even touched upon community resources that had fallen through the cracks. Each new detail spurred Jake's adrenaline, fueling his resolve to dig deeper. But as excitement built within him, the specter of Charlie peered just beyond the coffee shop's windows, a reminder of the threats that lay ahead. He caught sight of Charlie's unmistakable expression, a smirk that foretold trouble. Jake's thoughts raced. How could he confront someone who embodied all his fears while simultaneously begging the courage to pursue his passions? Confrontation was not something he sought, but he knew his new purpose meant standing firm despite external turmoil. A voice within him urged to delay no longer. He had to act. "I'll talk to them," he announced suddenly, irritation cutting through his contemplation. "I have to face it all, and I can't let anyone stand in the way." Strength surged through his words, even if uncertainty lurked at the edges. Mia nodded in approval. "That's the spirit. And remember, I'll be here to support you." Jake took a breath, knowing that the first step down this winding path was confronting not just Charlie, but the shadows of doubt and hesitation that pulsed within him. He felt the ground shift beneath his feet, and he understood what was at stake. His commitment to these stories, to these voices, now echoed in his own. But as Jake prepared to leave the coffee shop, adrenaline surging, he couldn't shake the cold, calculating gaze of Charlie from his mind. Would he truly be able to engage with the community while simultaneously facing a sly provocateur intent on undermining everything he was trying to build? The tension hung in the air like a thundercloud waiting to burst. Would Jake's voice resonate against the looming confrontation, or would it falter in the darkness? Jake stepped out of the coffee shop, his senses heightened, adrenaline coursing through his veins. The caffeine buzz buzzed beneath the surface, but it was the anticipation of a confrontation with Charlie that dominated his thoughts. Each step felt weighed down by unspent fears and buried memories of mockery, but his resolve shone through the dark. Charlie stood at the far corner, leaning against a lamppost with an air of nonchalance that incited a simmering anger within Jake. The casual way he surveyed the street suggested a predator's patience, waiting for the chance to pounce. Jake clenched his jaw, forcing himself to look away. He needed to focus, to harness the growing strength that had begun to take root in him, spurred by Mia's encouragement and the promise of real stories unfolding in front of him. Every instinct screamed that Charlie would mock his ambitions, belittle his plans, and make him question his ability to effect change. But at that moment, Jake reminded himself of the voices waiting to be heard, the struggles that needed to be shared. They became more than just noise. They transformed into a sacred mission. Each person's struggles pinned to his chest like medals of honor waiting to be acknowledged. He turned back to the coffee shop, eager to set things in motion. "Mia," he said as he re-entered, urgency tinging his tone. "When can we start?" "Why not now?" she suggested, her eyes brightening at the prospect. "I can call over a couple of regulars. They're always eager to share their stories." The prospect excited him, but the thought of Charlie lingered like a storm cloud. Ignoring it wouldn't expand his resolve. It would only suffocate him with fear. Jake needed to face Charlie head-on, confront the embodiment of his doubts, and free himself from its sway. Luckily, he wasn't going to tackle this solo. He had Mia. She was a bright light cutting through the clouds of intimidation. "Okay, let's do it," Jake agreed, channeling the energy directing every fiber of his being. "Let's gather some stories that need to be told." While Mia prepared the introductions, Jake took a moment to center himself. He released a slow breath, visualizing the expressions of the people he would meet. Their shared experiences would empower not just him, but everyone within their circle. He somehow felt connected to a greater purpose, a lifetime of yearning converging in this moment. As patrons began to trickle in, he felt his pulse quicken. The coffee shop transformed from a familiar haunt into a sanctuary of hope and resilience. He welcomed each person warmly, mindful of their histories. Their laughter, fatigue, and tension seeped into the room like colors blooming on an artist's canvas. During one such meeting, an older gentleman named Lawrence shared his tale of resilience and setbacks. "You know," he remarked, voice raw with emotion, "it's like every time I get knocked down, I rise again more determined. The fight isn't over just because I've lost. Jake felt an electric charge at the words, a mirror to his journey reflecting back at him. As conversations grew deeper, the stories filled the air, drowning out any whisper of Charlie's looming presence. Jake realized he was finding a voice, not just in the stories he was hearing, but within himself. Then suddenly, the door swung wide open, and in walked Charlie, the spectre bringing chaos with him. The lightness in the air shifted almost palpably. All conversations ceased, the atmosphere thickening with tension as if the universe held its breath. Jake shifted uncomfortably, grappling with the intensity of Charlie's smirk. Fear began to bubble again, but he clung to the stories around him. They were not mere tales, they were the foundation of his resurgence. What would happen when he confronted the embodiment of his fears, standing before an audience of people he had just begun to empower? The moment shimmered, ripe with potential and trepidation. He knew this would be the defining moment that could either embolden him or drag him back into the shadows of doubt. Jake felt his heart race, steadying his gaze on Charlie, preparing for a confrontation long overdue. The moment had come to face the very core of what had kept him from flourishing. Would the stories he had started collecting provide the strength he needed to confront Charlie, or would they falter under pressure? Jake's mind spun, the energy in the coffee shop constricting as Charlie pushed through the crowd. The patrons' looks darted between him and Charlie, an unspoken tension crackling in the air, but Jake remained anchored. He wouldn't let fear dictate his next move. "Jake!" Charlie's drawl sliced through the silence like a knife. "You still playing hero to a handful of nobodies? Or have you finally grown up and joined reality?" The derision dripped from each word, igniting Jake's anger. Every cynical remark Charlie made about the people who had stepped forward to share their experiences felt like a blow against the very purpose Jake was building. For a fleeting moment, doubt swirled in him, dredging up memories of past failures and ridicule. But then he recalled Lawrence's resilience. The elder's voice echoed within him, urging him to stand firm. "Charlie, these aren't just nobodies," Jake countered, his voice steadier than he felt inside. "They are real people with stories that matter." The words sprung from a place of conviction, the first indication of an emerging confidence. "Stories, please, they're just excuses for failure." Charlie leaned in, his amusement a facade hiding a predatory instinct. Jake felt the blood rush to his head, but instead of giving in to the impulse to retaliate, he took a slow breath. "Stories can illuminate truths you can't see," he replied, surprising himself with the balance in his tone. "And maybe that's where you fall short. You're too busy looking down from your pedestal." A smile crept onto Jake's face as he spoke, surprising himself further. Could it be that this confrontation, this realization of self-worth, had been simmering beneath his skin all along? Silence enveloped them for a moment, the atmosphere charged with a strange energy, and Jake heard an unheard gasp ripple through the crowd. Charlie's sneer dropped momentarily, replaced by thinly veiled annoyance. "Who do you think you are, trying to redefine everything? You think you're some kind of crusader? You'll accomplish nothing." Jake's heart raced at the challenge, but instead of retreating into insecurity, he pressed on, fueled by the stories that flowed through him like wildfire. "You think I'm just some wannabe journalist?" His voice escalated, the fire of determination igniting within. "You're wrong. Each person here carries a journey, and I want to share them, to validate their struggles instead of tearing them down." As he spoke, he could feel the weight of every story shared in the coffee shop coiling around him, fortifying him. The patrons began to stir, murmurs of support rippling up among them, emboldening his voice, each word becoming a battle cry. Charlie's face tightened, a flash of something unsettling crossing his features. Jake wasn't merely confronting him, he was wielding the powerful experiences of those people behind him, and it lit a fire that he never knew he had. Just then, Mia slipped beside Jake, laying a supportive hand on his shoulder. "You've got this," she whispered, her presence a solid wall against the oncoming tide of negativity. Together they stood, unyielding. "Do you really think you can shake my confidence with your petty insults?" Jake challenged, locking his gaze with Charlie's, refusing to falter. "I'm not afraid of you anymore." In that moment, Jake realized this wasn't just a test of wit against Charlie, it was a declaration of his transformation. Each confession shared fostered strength, and his resolve solidified. Fear transformed into bold action. But then, Charlie's expression shifted. A flicker of uncertainty danced across his features before he regained his composure. "You think this is over?" he spat, voice cold and full of menace. "I'll show you just how deluded you really are." With those words, he turned and strode out of the coffee shop, leaving a taut silence in his wake. Jake's heart pounded, the room now filled with uncertain energy, the earlier camaraderie crushed underneath the weight of Charlie's slurs. What just happened? Am I really standing my ground? Jake exhaled sharply, the adrenaline still coursing through him as the patrons looked to him for guidance. As voices fluttered back to life slowly, Jake began to process the enormity of his own development. He could feel the shift within. This was more than a confrontation. It was a launch pad. "Let's keep sharing your stories," he said, a newfound energy igniting in him. "We can't let a man like that diminish who we are. Together, let's amplify each voice in this room." But beneath the exhilaration lurked a deeper apprehension. What other demons was Charlie hiding? How far would he go to undermine Jake's journey? Jake's pulse surged again as he felt the weight of what lay ahead. This confrontation was only the beginning. The storm was brewing, and Jake would soon have to face its full force. Days turned into weeks as Jake poured every ounce of his energy into amplifying the voices of the community. He organized meetings in the coffee shop, bridging gaps with stories, diving into the heart of shared experiences. The conversations grew richer, woven with empathy and understanding, providing a platform for those like Maria and Chemo, the forgotten among their own. Each story shared became a stepping stone, gradually building the foundation Jake sought to establish. The townspeople, who had once shunned him, began to recognize the transformed man he had become. Rather than a threat to the status quo, he was a catalyst for connection, inspiring change. His relentless pursuit earned him respect, and Jake found a new depth of meaning and purpose in the very role he had feared. He was no longer merely a cowboy or the outsider he had once been. He was now a voice for the voiceless. One afternoon, as he sat in the coffee shop surrounded by familiar faces, a sense of satisfaction washed over him. Each patron he spoke to echoed the growing realization that their struggles were not isolated. Together, they forged an unstoppable force. The stories became more than words. They were narratives full of life, resilience, and hope wrapped in the fabric of humanity. With every meeting, Jake's confidence solidified. The hesitation that once held him back evaporated, replaced by a firm belief in his ability to foster change. Conversations shifted from mere acknowledgement to actionable plans. Resources pooled, ideas sparked, and soon projects emerged that aimed to uplift not just individuals, but the entire community. Then came the day the community gathered at the local hall, a gathering more significant than any had anticipated. Jake stood at the podium, a newfound authority anchoring his words. "This is not just about me or my journey, it's about you. It's about the child who needs medical assistance, the families struggling for respect, and the shared hope that in our unity lies strength." The audience, no longer indifferent, responded with engagement and energy. Applause erupted as he laid out the actionable steps for the upcoming community initiatives, motivated by stories that once lay buried. In that moment, Jake felt the culmination of his growth. He had not only proved his capacity for leadership, but had also turned the shadows of fear into pathways of opportunity. As the event concluded, a weight lifted off his shoulders. He stepped down, accepting the affirming applause while realizing that a chapter had closed. The lingering strain of doubt faded into a chorus of collective ambition. His heart swelled with pride, not only for himself, but for the community who had rallied around the very essence of humanity. Days later, Jake crossed paths with Danny, their previous conversation still fresh in his mind. "You did it, Jake. Not just for yourself, but for all of us," Danny said, gratitude shining in his eyes. "You've become a real voice, one the town respects and takes seriously." And there it was, the indisputable truth. He had feared losing everything when he first confronted Charlie, yet he gained so much more: courage, conviction, and a sense of belonging. The threats of ridicule, once paralyzing, were now mere echoes against the backdrop of what he had accomplished. In the quiet of the ranch, he stood beneath the vast sky, reflecting on how far he had come. The landscape before him felt different now, invigorated and vibrant. Jake realized he had taken ownership of his legacy while forging a new path intertwined with the stories of others. As he looked out, a tangible realization settled within him. The worth of one person's voice has the potential to touch many. With this understanding, Jake made an unyielding commitment to keep advocating, not for accolades, but for the lives intertwined with his journey. The winds of change flowed freely, his heart steady against the pulse of progress. And as his cowboy spirit revitalized, he stepped forward with a solid confidence, ready to embrace the uncharted. Jake had conquered the fears that once held him back and risen to occupy a rightful place in both his community and his own life. Now he was not just a guardian of the land, but also of the stories that lived within it. Jake had transformed, not merely into a better version of himself, but into the man he was always meant to be. You need to subscribe now to ensure you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and pave the way for more inspiring tales. Comment your reactions and theories about this transformative journey in the comments below. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this incredible conclusion to their own stories of overcoming adversity. Don't wait even one more second to show your support.